What if I told you that one of the most shocking and obscure events in American history has been deliberately erased from textbooks? Behind the familiar stories we think we know lies a world of forgotten tragedies, bizarre coincidences, and decisions so strange they seem almost impossible to believe. Tonight, we will uncover a tale so disturbing, so compelling, that it will challenge everything you thought you knew about the past. The Forgotten City of Gold. In the late 1800s, the American West was a land of promise and peril. Prospectors, dreamers, and opportunists flocked to the Rocky Mountains, lured by tales of untold wealth hidden in sparkling rivers and jagged cliffs. Yet, amid the glitter and dust, there existed a town so mysterious, so ephemeral, that its memory had all but vanished from history. Locals whispered of Aurora, a city of gold, supposedly built overnight by a wealthy European entrepreneur. But unlike other boom towns, Aurora did not simply decline, it disappeared. What makes Aurora remarkable isn't just the legend of gold, but the lives it consumed and the secrets it concealed. Archaeologists today uncover human remains, forgotten artifacts, and coded letters buried beneath layers of time. These remnants hint at a story far stranger than mere greed, a tale of secret societies, experimental ventures, and political intrigue that reached the highest offices of government. James Caldwell, a young historian from Boston, stumbled upon a tattered ledger in the Library of Congress, barely noting the city's name in a marginal note. What he discovered would ignite a decades-long investigation spanning continents, exposing hidden documents, and connecting Aurora to other mysterious towns erased from official records. The ledger spoke of a mysterious fire, unexplained disappearances, and letters written in codes no one could decipher. What was intended as a city of prosperity had instead become a nightmare. Survivors' testimonies, recorded in fragile journals, described strange rituals, sudden vanishing of families, and unexplained wealth transfers. Aurora was more than a lost city. It was a reflection of the darkest, most disturbing corners of American history, hidden in plain sight. By the end of this chapter, one thing becomes evident. Uncovering Aurora is not just about history. It is about revealing the human obsession with wealth, power, and secrecy, and the consequences when that obsession collides with reality. The journey to uncover Aurora's truth led James Caldwell deep into the Rocky Mountains, where rugged peaks and dense forests had kept secrets for a century. Local legends spoke of strange lights in the mountains, whispers of hidden tunnels, and treasure hunters who had never returned. Caldwell knew that to understand Aurora, he had to follow these traces, no matter the danger of the terrain. The town, according to surviving accounts, had been meticulously planned. Streets were aligned with precision, and buildings were constructed from imported European stone. Yet beneath this apparent order lay cryptic symbols etched into doorways and walls, which historians now believe were clues left by the city's mysterious founder. Caldwell's research suggested that these symbols were not merely decorative. They were part of a coded map leading to secret vaults, experimental laboratories, and perhaps evidence of a conspiracy involving local and national elites. One night, while poring over maps in his cabin, Caldwell noticed a pattern. The locations of Aurora and 3 other vanished towns seemed to form a triangle across the western United States. This alignment was eerily precise, as if orchestrated by someone with arcane knowledge of geometry and power. Further examination of letters in the ledger revealed references to the Council of Shadows, a clandestine group with ties to industrial magnates, politicians, and scholars who sought to manipulate wealth and influence the course of history. Eyewitness accounts painted a chilling picture. Residents described strange machinery, unusual experiments in metallurgy and alchemy, and sudden disappearances of entire families.
One survivor wrote that on certain nights the city seemed alive, moving shadows like a living organism, and a low humming filled the streets. Modern historians remain baffled. Was this metaphorical, or did Aurora truly house technologies and knowledge far ahead of its time? Caldwell's discoveries pointed to a pattern of hidden histories across America, events and towns systematically removed from official records, leaving only whispers in journals, letters, and oral traditions. The deeper he dug, the more he realized that Aurora's story was not isolated. It was part of a network of suppressed knowledge, unexplained phenomena, and disturbing truths about power, ambition, and human obsession. By the end of the chapter, Caldwell knew one thing for certain. The further he pursued Aurora's secrets, the more dangerous it became. Forces, both human and unknown, seemed determined to keep history buried. Yet the lure of truth, and the possibility of uncovering what no one else dared, propelled him forward, into the heart of the Rocky Mountains, and into a mystery far stranger than gold. James Caldwell's research into Aurora had unveiled the first threads of a network that stretched far beyond the Rocky Mountains. References in the ledger to the Council of Shadows intrigued him the most. Who were they? What power did they wield? And why had they ensured Aurora's disappearance from public memory? According to fragmented accounts, the council was a secret coalition of industrial magnates, politicians, and scholars who believed that certain knowledge, scientific, financial, and occult, was too dangerous for the general public. Aurora, it seemed, had been a testing ground for their experiments, economic schemes that manipulated entire populations, secret technologies, and social experiments on its residents. Caldwell traveled to Denver to access archived newspapers, personal letters, and diaries. One 1992 diary entry described a night when the entire town was lit unnaturally bright, as if thousands of lamps burned without fuel, and residents heard strange mechanical hums coming from beneath the streets. By dawn, several prominent citizens had vanished, leaving behind only cryptic messages and symbols etched in stone. The council's methods were chillingly systematic. Families that questioned authority disappeared quietly, their homes emptied, and any documents that might reveal the truth were confiscated. Letters to outsiders were intercepted. Any accounts of the town's prosperity and its sudden disappearance were buried in local newspapers under vague reports of economic decline or natural disasters. Caldwell found a map with Aurora at its center, connected by faint lines to other mysterious locations: Lost Springs, California, Black Hollow, Montana, and Riverview, Nevada. Each town had a similar story of rapid growth, unexplained innovation, and sudden abandonment. The pattern suggested deliberate orchestration, not mere coincidence. But the most astonishing discovery came from a coded letter written in 1891 by one of Aurora's founders. When deciphered, it revealed plans for a self-sustaining city powered by hidden geothermal sources, experimental metallurgy, and a network of underground tunnels. The letter also hinted at a document repository containing knowledge so revolutionary it could alter the course of the nation. The Council of Shadows had ensured that this knowledge never reached the public eye. Caldwell realized the stakes were higher than he imagined. Aurora was not just a lost city. It was a keystone in a vast secret history of America, one that had been carefully concealed by those who feared its power. Every document, every artifact, and every whispered testimony was a piece of a puzzle that, if revealed, could challenge everything Americans thought they knew about their past. By the end of Chapter 3, Caldwell understood that uncovering Aurora and exposing the Council of Shadows was no longer merely an academic pursuit. It was a dangerous journey into the dark heart of history itself, where truth and secrecy clashed in ways that had deadly consequences. The deeper James Caldwell dug into Aurora's past, the more he realized that the town's disappearance was no ordinary accident. Local folklore described a sudden catastrophic fire that consumed the city overnight, leaving nothing but ashes and silence. Yet Caldwell's research suggested something far stranger than a natural disaster. Eyewitness accounts from letters hidden in the Library of Congress spoke of an underground network of tunnels beneath Aurora, built to store gold, artifacts, and experimental machinery. Residents had reported strange vibrations, low-frequency hums, and flickering lights from the tunnels in the weeks leading up to the disaster. One terrified letter described a machine that breathed fire, yet gave no smoke,
and a light so bright it burned the eyes. Caldwell cross-referenced geological surveys and found anomalous heat signatures beneath the town's former location, suggesting underground combustion or experimental energy sources. Some historians now speculate that Aurora housed an early prototype of geothermal energy exploitation, decades ahead of its time, which may have caused an accidental explosion. But there were also hints of something deliberately orchestrated. The Council of Shadows, it seemed, had anticipated the town's potential to reveal forbidden knowledge. Diaries and letters hinted at the use of occult rituals to destabilize the town's infrastructure, a combination of superstition, fear, and psychological control. Residents reported strange symbols appearing overnight, mysterious figures roaming the streets, and a pervasive sense of dread that gripped even the bravest. Caldwell's most disturbing discovery was a map showing hidden vaults beneath Aurora, which, according to coded entries, contained experimental weapons, encrypted financial ledgers, and manuscripts on occult sciences. The council's intention, it appeared, was not only to remove the town, but also to erase any trace of the revolutionary technologies and ideas being tested there. Letters from survivors described the night of the fire in horrifying detail. Families fled as the ground seemed to breathe and crack, and fire erupted from beneath, swallowing entire streets without warning. No official records captured the scale of the tragedy. Newspapers reported a minor fire or structural collapse, hiding the reality of what historians like Caldwell now uncovered: a city destroyed by a mixture of human ambition, experimental technology, and fear-driven secrecy. By the chapter's end, Caldwell faced a chilling realization. Uncovering Aurora was not just a historical investigation. It was a confrontation with forces that had manipulated, silenced, and erased an entire city and its people from memory. Every step forward was a step into danger. Yet the truth beckoned him, promising revelations that could rewrite history as America knew it. James Caldwell had spent months piecing together fragments of Aurora's past, yet nothing prepared him for what he found next. Hidden among dusty archives in Denver were handwritten journals from survivors, carefully preserved by families who refused to let the town's memory vanish entirely. The words inside painted a picture far more disturbing than any ledger or newspaper article could. One entry, dated June 3, 1891, described a scene of mass panic. "We hear the ground groaning, the tunnels beneath us alive, fathers, mothers, children vanishing into the earth, swallowed by darkness. And above, the council watches, silent, smiling. We are not meant to leave, only to vanish like smoke into memory." These testimonies revealed that Aurora's disappearance was not accidental. It was the culmination of years of experimentation, both scientific and psychological, by the Council of Shadows. They had tested energy harnessing experiments, experimental metals, and rudimentary geothermal devices, all kept secret from the outside world. When an experiment went wrong, or perhaps was deliberately sabotaged, the town collapsed, and fire consumed much of what remained. Caldwell discovered letters indicating that survivors had fled into the Rockies, forming secret communities and passing down their stories orally. They spoke of underground vaults, hidden libraries, and coded messages that contained knowledge deemed too dangerous for public consumption. One elderly descendant, now long dead, had written, "Aurora's knowledge is a flame. The council will extinguish it, but the ember remains, waiting for those brave enough to seek it." Even stranger were references to unknown phenomena, lights that moved without source, shadows that behaved independently, and mechanical hums that could be felt through the ground. Modern historians speculate these could have been early electrical experiments, seismic disturbances caused by the tunnels, or something more obscure, perhaps technologies lost to time. Caldwell also uncovered financial records showing that the council had profited immensely from Aurora's disappearance. Gold, artifacts, and experimental materials were transported secretly to private estates and warehouses across the country. The pattern suggested that Aurora was not merely a failed city, but a carefully orchestrated experiment designed to enrich and empower a hidden elite while erasing any evidence of their actions. By the end of the chapter, Caldwell realized the enormity of his mission. Uncovering Aurora's secrets meant confronting a network that had manipulated history itself. Every journal, every coded message, and every surviving artifact brought him closer to truths that were as astonishing as they were dangerous. The shadows of Aurora were alive, and Caldwell knew that exposing them could shake the foundations of history. But the lure of truth and the stories of those lost drove him forward into a past hidden by fire, secrecy, and fear. Caldwell's investigation led him to the very heart of the Rocky Mountains, where the remains of Aurora had once stood. Modern surveys revealed an intricate labyrinth of tunnels, many partially collapsed, but some remarkably intact. These tunnels were not merely storage spaces. They were laboratories, living quarters, and sites of experiments that defied conventional understanding. Documents and survivor testimonies hinted at experiments combining early electrical engineering, chemical reactions, and occult practices. Some residents described strange lights dancing along the tunnel walls, mechanical devices producing vibrations that seemed to influence human behavior, and rituals conducted to ensure compliance or fear. Caldwell realized that Aurora had been a nexus of science and superstition, where knowledge and secrecy intertwined in dangerous ways. One journal described the heart of the city, a chamber where geothermal vents were harnessed to power strange machinery, perhaps attempting to create a self-sustaining energy source decades before such technology existed. Another entry spoke of symbols etched into the rock, representing mathematical formulas and alchemical instructions. Scholars today debate whether these were merely coded instructions or a blend of early science and occultism intended to manipulate both nature and humans. Caldwell's most chilling discovery came from a survivor letter describing a ritual night. Residents reported a low hum vibrating through the tunnels as shadows moved unnaturally. Families who resisted the council's control vanished that night. Later, the letter hinted that the council used Aurora's experiments to test human psychology under extreme stress, blending fear, isolation, and the unknown to observe behavior, effectively turning the city into a living laboratory. Physical evidence supported these accounts. Layers of ash contained traces of chemicals not common at the time, suggesting early chemical engineering experiments. Metal fragments found in collapsed tunnels revealed alloys that were unusually strong and lightweight, technologies ahead of their era. Caldwell began to suspect that the council's objective was not merely wealth or power, but the creation of knowledge too potent and dangerous for the public, deliberately hidden beneath the city. Yet the more he uncovered, the more questions arose. Could Aurora's destruction have been partly accidental, caused by experimental mishaps? Or was it an intentional erasure, combining fire, fear, and human manipulation to bury evidence of knowledge the council deemed too powerful? Every clue seemed to point to a chilling possibility. Aurora's fate was not just history, it was a lesson in secrecy, control, and ambition. James Caldwell's research into Aurora had reached a point where legend and fact began to blur. While most of American history overlooked Aurora, the evidence he uncovered suggested that the town had been a testing ground for innovations decades ahead of its time. From rudimentary electrical devices to strange alloys, Aurora's secrets hinted at technologies the world wouldn't see for decades. The survivor journals described mechanical contraptions that seemed almost alive. Small machines powered by geothermal energy carried messages, illuminated tunnels, and even operated simple experimental tools. These devices, Caldwell realized, were primitive prototypes of automation and
Energy harnessing systems, centuries ahead of what the broader public would later invent. But the technology was inseparable from the Council of Shadows' hidden agenda. Letters and coded journals suggested that the Council had intentionally erased Aurora to prevent public access to these advancements, controlling the knowledge for financial and political power. Entire families who resisted the Council were quietly removed, their journals and notes confiscated, ensuring that only fragments of the truth survived. Caldwell's investigation also uncovered financial ledgers detailing the diversion of Aurora's wealth into secret accounts held by industrial magnates in New York and Philadelphia. These records revealed an orchestrated network of influence connecting Aurora's disappearance to major historical events such as banking collapses, land seizures, and infrastructure projects in the American West. Every clue pointed to a deliberate strategy. Aurora was not a failure, it was a sacrifice for power, secrecy, and control. Even more astonishing were references to hidden knowledge and scientific manuscripts that supposedly contained experiments blending chemistry, early electricity, and psychology. Some described methods to manipulate human perception and behavior, techniques the Council allegedly used to maintain order, enforce obedience, and test limits under extreme stress. Caldwell began to see that Aurora's dark history was not just an isolated event, but a glimpse into a pattern of systemic manipulation that spanned decades of American growth. Despite the secrecy, fragments of knowledge survived. Caldwell discovered sketches of energy devices, coded instructions for alloys, stronger than anything commercially available at the time, and experimental blueprints for systems that could generate sustainable energy using geothermal sources. These lost technologies, combined with the Council's control, suggested that America's rapid industrial expansion may have been shaped, in part, by hidden experiments originating from Aurora. By the end of Chapter 7, Caldwell faced a sobering reality. Aurora was more than a lost city. It was a nexus of human ambition, secret knowledge, and power struggles, hidden beneath layers of fire, secrecy, and forgotten history.
To expose it fully would mean challenging the narrative of American history itself and perhaps confronting forces that still lingered in the shadows. James Caldwell's journey into Aurora's past had revealed astonishing technologies, coded journals, and the shadowy influence of the Council of Shadows. But the most haunting revelations were the human stories hidden beneath the city's ashes. For every prototype or ledger he discovered, there were accounts of lives lost, families vanished, and communities fractured. Survivor testimonies painted a picture of daily life under constant fear. Residents recalled sudden disappearances, unexplained illnesses, and psychological experiments designed to test obedience and resilience. One journal described a child's diary: "Father is gone, mother is gone. I do not know if the city wants me to live or vanish. I hear the machines humming beneath my bed at night." These chilling accounts revealed that Aurora's history was not only about lost gold or hidden technologies, it was about the price humanity paid for secrecy and ambition. Caldwell traced descendants of these survivors scattered across the Midwest. Many had preserved fragments of journals, letters, and symbols passed down orally. Together, these stories suggested a network of hidden knowledge, not just in Aurora, but across multiple towns, seemingly erased from records. Caldwell realized that the Council of Shadows had carefully manipulated events, erasing towns and suppressing communities to maintain control over knowledge, wealth, and influence. Among the most shocking discoveries were letters hinting at deliberate sabotage. Certain experimental devices were tampered with, leading to catastrophic failures in the tunnels beneath Aurora. Witnesses described low-frequency vibrations and bursts of heat, followed by sudden structural collapses. Families who attempted to flee were intercepted by shadowy figures, members of the council, ensuring that no one escaped to tell the full truth. Yet despite the fear and loss, Caldwell uncovered glimmers of resilience. Some residents had managed to encode the town's secrets in songs, folklore, and symbolic carvings, ensuring that the knowledge of Aurora could survive, even if fragmented. These remnants provided Caldwell with clues to reconstruct the council's experiments, the hidden technologies, and the patterns of disappearance that shaped the city's final days. By the end of the chapter, Caldwell understood the gravity of his mission. Aurora was more than simply a historical curiosity. It was a testament to human ambition, greed, secrecy, and resilience. The city's story, though almost forgotten, carried lessons about the dangers of unchecked power, the potential of hidden knowledge, and the human cost when history is deliberately rewritten. Caldwell realized that revealing Aurora's secrets could reshape the narrative of American history, exposing truths long buried beneath ashes, silence, and fear. By the time James Caldwell reached the site of Aurora's underground tunnels, he understood that the city was more than a lost town. It was a labyrinth of secrets, built to hide knowledge, wealth, and power from the outside world. The entrances to the vaults had been carefully concealed beneath rubble and overgrowth, accessible only through intricate mechanisms that had withstood decades of decay. Inside, Caldwell found rows of sealed compartments, each labeled with cryptic symbols that mirrored the coded letters from the Library of Congress. Some symbols resembled mathematical formulas, others alchemical notations, and a few combined both in ways Caldwell had never seen. These vaults were not merely storage rooms, they were repositories of forbidden knowledge, containing documents, experimental devices, and artifacts deliberately hidden from the public. One vault held manuscripts on early electrical experiments, detailing the harnessing of geothermal energy to power mechanical systems. Another contained blueprints for alloys far stronger and lighter than contemporary metals, suggesting technologies that would not reappear in mainstream engineering for decades. Caldwell realized that Aurora was a prototype city, designed not just for habitation, but as a laboratory for the Council of Shadows' ambitious experiments. Perhaps the most chilling discovery was a set of letters detailing the Council's strategy for controlling information. They had created entire towns, funded technological experiments, and orchestrated disappearances to ensure that knowledge remained in the hands of the elite. Every lost town, including Aurora, was a node in a vast network of manipulation designed to consolidate power across regions and industries. Caldwell also found encrypted personal diaries containing names of families who had resisted the council. Some had attempted to escape with knowledge of the vaults, only to vanish without a trace. These diaries hinted at interpersonal betrayals, hidden alliances, and sacrifices made to protect fragments of Aurora's secrets. The codes themselves proved challenging. They blended linguistic patterns, numeric sequences, and symbolic logic in a way that suggested both genius and obsession. Caldwell realized that deciphering these messages was not just a puzzle, it was a key to unlocking the true extent of Aurora's technologies, financial networks, and conspiratorial reach. By the end of Chapter 9, Caldwell was no longer merely a historian. He had become a detective of hidden history, tracing the web of secrets left by the Council. Aurora's vaults were not just a testament to human ingenuity. They were a warning about ambition unrestrained by ethics, power concealed by secrecy, and history written in the shadows. The stakes were never higher, and the deeper Caldwell went, the more he realized that some truths might be too dangerous to reveal.
As James Caldwell pieced together the fragments of Aurora, a chilling picture began to emerge. The city had not simply vanished, it had been obliterated by human ambition, experimental technology, and deliberate secrecy. The Council of Shadows had ensured that every trace of Aurora's existence would be buried, not only physically, but in the collective memory of the nation. Caldwell's research revealed that the town's hidden technologies had potential applications far beyond energy and metallurgy. Manuscripts detailed mechanical devices capable of influencing human behavior, experimental communication systems, and even early forms of automated control mechanisms. The implications were staggering. If these technologies had been widely deployed, the very course of American industrial and political development might have been different. Moreover, Caldwell found evidence that the Council's network extended into modern America. Corporate empires, political dynasties, and secret societies all seemed to trace roots back to Aurora and other lost towns. The financial ledgers, cross-referenced with modern records, suggested that some of the wealth amassed from Aurora's disappearance had seeded institutions still influential today. Every discovery painted a picture of systematic manipulation spanning generations. But the most haunting revelations were the human stories. Survivor diaries revealed families torn apart, children growing up in fear, and communities scattered across the West, carrying fragments of knowledge in songs, symbols, and oral traditions. These fragments, Caldwell realized, were the threads connecting past to present, waiting for someone to weave them into a coherent narrative. As he decrypted the final letters, Caldwell uncovered the ultimate intent for the Council: to control history itself, shaping narratives, suppressing knowledge, and deciding which innovations and truths would see the light of day. Aurora, in this sense, was both a laboratory and a lesson, a demonstration of what happens when knowledge and power converge unchecked. By the end of Chapter 10, Caldwell faced a moral and historical dilemma. The secrets of Aurora were now his to reveal, but doing so risked exposing centuries of hidden networks, financial manipulations, and technologies the world was not prepared to understand. Yet he knew the truth must be told. Aurora's story, with all its darkness, innovation, and human cost, was a testament to the fragility of history and the enduring power of memory. Caldwell's journey had transformed him. No longer just a historian, he had become a guardian of secrets and a witness to the consequences of ambition unbridled by ethics. Aurora,
though lost to fire and secrecy, had left a legacy of lessons that modern America, its institutions, its people, and its history, could no longer ignore. James Caldwell had reached the point where legend, survivor testimony, and historical records converged. Hidden deep in the Rocky Mountains, he uncovered the last remaining vault of Aurora, a place that had remained untouched for a century. The vault was sealed with mechanisms so intricate that even the most skilled engineers would struggle to open them. Yet after weeks of careful analysis and decoding, Caldwell finally gained access. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged paper, metal, and a strange chemical tang that hinted at Aurora's experimental technologies. Stacked neatly were maps, journals, blueprints, and strange artifacts, each more astonishing than the last. One map outlined a network of underground tunnels connecting Aurora to other lost towns in the west, forming a hidden web of cities and laboratories unknown to official history. Caldwell's eyes widened as he examined the journals. They detailed experiments in early automation, energy harnessing, and psychological influence, blending science and occult practices. There were accounts of families who resisted the council's control, leaving coded messages in the margins of diaries, messages that now, with Caldwell's deciphering skills, could be fully understood. Perhaps the most shocking revelation came from a letter signed by the council itself, addressed to the city's founder. It revealed the intent behind Aurora, not merely to create wealth or test technology, but to control the flow of knowledge and influence generations of American society. Entire towns had been sacrificed to conceal innovations, and human lives were considered expendable in the pursuit of secrecy and power. Among the artifacts was a mechanical device unlike anything Caldwell had seen, an early prototype that seemed capable of converting geothermal energy into usable mechanical work, a design decades ahead of its time. This device, combined with detailed instructions, suggested that Aurora had been experimenting with renewable energy and automation long before mainstream science caught up. As Caldwell pieced together the evidence, a chilling pattern emerged. Aurora's story was not isolated. It was part of a larger conspiracy network that had influenced industrial growth, urban development, and even political power in the United States. The Council of Shadows had effectively manipulated history, ensuring that only fragments of knowledge survived, while the majority of truth remained hidden. By the end of Chapter 11, Caldwell realized that the vault was more than just a repository. It was a mirror reflecting the intersection of ambition, secrecy, and human cost. Exposing it would challenge accepted narratives, reveal hidden truths, and illuminate the dark forces that had shaped modern America. For the first time, Caldwell felt the weight of responsibility, not just as a historian, but as a guardian of secrets that the world was not prepared to forget. By now, James Caldwell had uncovered evidence that challenged the very foundations of history. Aurora was no longer a forgotten town. It was a nexus of experiments, ambition, and human cost, whose effects rippled far beyond its physical disappearance. The journals and artifacts revealed that the Council of Shadows had orchestrated not just Aurora's destruction, but also the systematic manipulation of multiple communities across the West, altering the lives of thousands. Survivor accounts described families fractured, children orphaned, and communities scattered across the West. Some descendants had carried coded knowledge for generations, encoding it in folklore, music, and oral traditions. Others were silenced, their letters destroyed, their voices erased from official records. Caldwell realized that human resilience had preserved fragments of Aurora, but only just enough for him to reconstruct its story. The conspiracy's scope was staggering. Documents hinted that Aurora's technologies, geothermal energy, automated devices, and advanced metallurgy had been repurposed secretly, influencing industrial developments in cities like Denver, Chicago, and San Francisco. The council had essentially seeded modern infrastructure with knowledge harvested from the destroyed town, while ensuring that its origins remained unknown. Even more disturbing were references to psychological experiments. Residents of Aurora had been subjected to stress tests,
isolation, and behavioral conditioning, experiments intended to study human reactions under extreme circumstances. Letters suggested that the council was assessing not just survival, but obedience, fear management, and social control, knowledge they would later apply in shaping communities across America. Caldwell also discovered records of obscure correspondence between council members and prominent figures in government and industry. These letters revealed a hidden web of influence that extended into modern times, suggesting that the ramifications of Aurora's secrets were still shaping society, policy, and technological development. The human cost was impossible to ignore. Entire families had vanished, and the lives of survivors were forever altered. Yet Caldwell also found proof of courage and ingenuity, hidden diaries, encrypted letters, and symbolic carvings that preserved knowledge and defied erasure. These remnants formed a bridge between past and present, a thread that could finally expose the truth about Aurora and the Council of Shadows. By the end of Chapter 12, Caldwell stood at a crossroads. He possessed evidence that could rewrite American history, revealing lost technologies, conspiracies, and untold human suffering. But revealing the truth also carried risk. The same forces that had erased Aurora might still be active, guarding secrets that some believed the world was not prepared to confront. Yet Caldwell knew one thing: the shadows of Aurora demanded to be unveiled, and he would carry the story forward, no matter the cost.
James Caldwell had reached a stage in his investigation where the line between history and legend blurred. Deep in the heart of Aurora's underground labyrinth, he discovered a chamber that had remained untouched for over a century. The air was heavy with dust, and the walls were etched with cryptic symbols, diagrams, and coded instructions. This was not just storage, it was a treasure trove of knowledge, power, and danger. Within the chamber lay artifacts that defied explanation, metallic devices of unknown purpose, blueprints for energy systems far ahead of their time, and journals detailing psychological experiments on the city's residents. Some of the journals were bound in leather, inscribed with symbols that Caldwell could barely decipher, hinting at occult practices fused with scientific experimentation. Perhaps the most astonishing artifact was a mechanical device that appeared to harness geothermal energy. It was a primitive generator, yet Caldwell could see the potential to power entire cities, decades before such systems existed. Alongside it were coded manuscripts describing applications for automation, metallurgy, and social control, revealing that Aurora had been a prototype for technologies and systems the wider world would not see for generations. Caldwell also found evidence that the Council of Shadows had anticipated the town's destruction. Several artifacts bore hidden compartments containing letters, maps, and symbols detailing escape routes, secret vaults, and warnings for future generations. The Council's obsession with secrecy was evident. Even in the act of hiding knowledge, they had meticulously ensured that only someone determined and skilled enough could uncover it. The human stakes became personal. Caldwell realized that some of the descendants he had traced across America were still unknowingly carrying fragments of Aurora's legacy. The survival of knowledge, he understood, depended on his ability to interpret, preserve, and reveal it. This was no longer a purely academic pursuit. It was a race against forces determined to keep Aurora buried. As he carefully documented each artifact, Caldwell noticed a pattern. The items formed a cohesive system, linking Aurora's lost technologies, secret experiments, and hidden finances into a single network. The implications were staggering. Aurora was not merely a lost city, it was a blueprint for a hidden empire, a controlled experiment that had shaped modern America in ways the public would never know. By the end of Chapter 13, Caldwell felt the weight of responsibility pressing upon him. He now held the keys to secrets that could rewrite history, expose conspiracies, and challenge the accepted narrative of progress and power in America. Yet with knowledge came danger. The shadows of Aurora were still present, guarding their secrets, and Caldwell understood that unveiling them could change everything, for better or worse. With the hidden artifacts, journals, and coded manuscripts laid before him, James Caldwell began to see the full scope of the Council of Shadows network. Aurora had not existed in isolation. It was part of a vast web of lost towns, secret laboratories, and financial strongholds stretching across the American West. Each town had its purpose. Some were centers of experimentation, others laboratories for social and psychological studies, and yet others were purely repositories of wealth and knowledge, all controlled by the council. Caldwell meticulously cross-referenced letters, maps, and diaries. A pattern emerged. The council had manipulated entire industries, influenced urban development, and even swayed political elections, all while remaining invisible to the public eye. Their reach extended into banking, railroads, energy companies, and even universities, ensuring that Aurora's secrets and the lessons of its destruction remained buried. Among the journals, Caldwell found references to a final experiment in Aurora, one designed to test the limits of human obedience, resilience, and ingenuity. Residents were monitored, stressed, and subjected to a combination of psychological manipulation and experimental technologies. The results, recorded meticulously by council members, revealed not just compliance, but the darker tendencies of ambition, fear, and survival. Aurora, it seemed, was a microcosm of society itself, a controlled environment where power, knowledge, and human nature intersected in terrifying ways. The artifacts reinforced this revelation. Devices for harnessing geothermal energy, blueprints linking other lost towns, and encrypted financial ledgers formed a cohesive system of control. Caldwell realized that the council had engineered not only a city, but a blueprint for societal influence, using Aurora as a model for shaping history in secret. By the end of Chapter 14, Caldwell felt the enormity of what he had uncovered. The shadows of Aurora were no longer confined to a forgotten town. They stretched into the present, influencing institutions, technology, and culture. Every artifact, journal, and coded message was a piece of a hidden history that could challenge everything Americans thought they knew. Caldwell understood that revealing this network could shake the foundations of power, expose long-hidden truths, and illuminate the human cost of ambition and secrecy. Yet he also knew it was his duty. The story of Aurora, the council, and the lost towns could no longer remain hidden in the shadows. James Caldwell stood in the heart of Aurora's final vault, surrounded by centuries of hidden knowledge, lost technologies, and the remnants of a city erased from history. The full scope of the Council of Shadows' influence was now clear. Aurora was more than a town. It was a testing ground, a laboratory, and a blueprint for controlling wealth, information, and even human behavior. As he carefully documented each artifact, Caldwell noticed a pattern. The items formed a cohesive system, linking Aurora's lost technologies, secret experiments, and hidden finances into a single network. The implications were staggering. Aurora was not merely a lost city, it was a blueprint for a hidden empire, a controlled experiment that had shaped modern America in ways the public would never know. By the end of Chapter 13, Caldwell felt the enormity of what he had uncovered. The shadows of Aurora were no longer confined to a forgotten town. They stretched into the present, influencing institutions, technology, and culture. Every artifact, journal, and coded message was a piece of a hidden history that could challenge everything Americans thought they knew. Caldwell understood that revealing this network could shake the foundations of power, expose long-hidden truths, and illuminate the human cost of ambition and secrecy. Yet he also knew it was his duty. The story of Aurora, the council, and the lost towns could no longer remain hidden in the shadows. James Caldwell stood in the heart of Aurora's final vault, surrounded by centuries of hidden knowledge, lost technologies, and the remnants of a city erased from history. The full scope of the Council of Shadows' influence was now clear. Aurora was more than a town. It was a testing ground, a laboratory, and a blueprint for controlling wealth, information, and even human behavior. As he carefully documented each artifact, Caldwell noticed a pattern. The items formed a cohesive system, linking Aurora's lost technologies, secret experiments, and hidden finances into a single network. The implications were staggering. Aurora was not merely a lost city, it was a blueprint for a hidden empire, a controlled experiment that had shaped modern America in ways the public would never know. By the end of Chapter 13, Caldwell felt the enormity of what he had uncovered. The shadows of Aurora were no longer confined to a forgotten town. They stretched into the present, influencing institutions, technology, and culture. Every artifact, journal, and coded message was a piece of a hidden history that could challenge everything Americans thought they knew. Caldwell understood that revealing this network could shake the foundations of power, expose long-hidden truths, and illuminate the human cost of ambition and secrecy. Yet he also knew it was his duty. The story of Aurora, the council, and the lost towns could no longer remain hidden in the shadows. James Caldwell stood in the heart of Aurora's final vault, surrounded by centuries of hidden knowledge, lost technologies, and the remnants of a city erased from history. The full scope of the Council of Shadows' influence was now clear. Aurora was more than a town. It was a testing ground, a laboratory, and a blueprint for controlling wealth, information, and even human behavior. As he carefully documented each artifact, Caldwell noticed a pattern. The items formed a cohesive system, linking Aurora's lost technologies, secret experiments, and hidden finances into a single network. The implications were staggering. Aurora was not merely a lost city, it was a blueprint for a hidden empire, a controlled experiment that had shaped modern America in ways the public would never.
The journals detailed the human cost. Entire families had vanished, communities were scattered, and survivors had lived in fear for generations. Caldwell read the words of a child who had survived the fire. "We are ashes now, but some of us carry the flame." It became clear that Aurora's true legacy was not only its lost technologies, but the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to preserve knowledge, hope, and memory, even in the face of deliberate erasure. Caldwell also decrypted the final letters of the Council. They revealed the organization's philosophy. Knowledge must be controlled, power must be concentrated, and society must be guided by those who understood both. Aurora was merely the first experiment in a long-term plan for societal influence, but its destruction had left fragments that could now reveal the Council's intentions. In the end, Caldwell faced a choice. He could bury the truth, preserving the secrets and protecting powerful institutions, or he could reveal Aurora's story, exposing hidden technologies, conspiracies, and the human cost of ambition. He chose the latter, knowing that truth, though dangerous, was the only path to justice and understanding. By publishing his findings, Caldwell ensured that Aurora would no longer be a forgotten town. Its legacy, lost technologies, suppressed knowledge, human stories, and the hidden network of the Council would enter public consciousness. The shadows had been lifted, but the lessons endured. Ambition unchecked, secrecy enforced, and human lives treated as pawns could alter the course of history. Aurora, though erased from maps and memory, had finally returned in truth, illuminating both the brilliance and darkness of human endeavor. After publishing his initial findings, James Caldwell realized that Aurora's story did not end in the 19th century. The ramifications of its secrets stretched across decades, subtly shaping modern America. Industries, financial systems, and even political institutions bore traces of the Council of Shadows' influence. The more Caldwell studied, the more he saw patterns repeating: wealth concentration, technological leaps, and social experiments that mirrored Aurora's hidden agenda. The journals hinted at hidden networks in modern cities, descendants of the Council, carefully preserving knowledge while guiding development. These individuals were not simply conspirators, they were curators of influence, ensuring that Aurora's lessons, both technological and societal, continued to shape events. Caldwell was astonished to realize that history was not linear, but layered, with invisible threads connecting lost towns like Aurora to contemporary society. Among the artifacts Caldwell examined, he found blueprints for communication devices and early computing systems long before their public invention. The Council had experimented with information control, encryption, and data manipulation, predating what the modern world would recognize as cyber strategy. He began to understand that Aurora had been not just a city, but a prototype for information warfare and societal control, its echoes still present in ways people barely noticed. Caldwell's personal reflections grew heavier. The deeper he delved, the more he realized that truth has a cost. Families who had preserved Aurora's stories were living reminders of courage and survival, yet their legacy had been threatened by centuries of suppression. Caldwell knew that by revealing these truths, he was stepping into a long shadow of power, one that might resist disclosure at any cost. Modern implications became starkly clear. Aurora's lost technologies could accelerate energy, automation, and infrastructure development, but they could also empower individuals or groups with the capacity to manipulate society. Caldwell faced the paradox of knowledge. Some truths could illuminate the world, others could wreak havoc if misused. The journals repeatedly emphasized ethical restraint, echoing warnings from those who had lived and died under the Council's gaze. By the end of Chapter 16, Caldwell resolved that Aurora's legacy had to be preserved with both truth and caution. It was not enough to expose the Council or the technologies, he had to contextualize them, revealing the brilliance, the ambition, and the human cost. Aurora's story, he realized, was a mirror reflecting not just the past, but the present and future, the complex interplay of innovation, secrecy, and morality. James Caldwell had uncovered journals, artifacts, and maps, but one discovery proved to be the most startling: a hidden ledger meticulously preserved beneath Aurora's central vault. The ledger contained decades of financial records, meticulously detailing the movement of wealth, resources, and investments controlled by the Council of Shadows. Caldwell realized that the city's destruction had not been a mere accident. It had been engineered transfer of power and wealth, the likes of which modern historians had never imagined. The ledger revealed connections between Aurora and industrial developments across the United States. Railroads, mining operations, and early electricity networks were secretly funded by resources diverted from the town's coffers. Even major corporations, previously thought to have arisen independently, bore financial fingerprints of Aurora's lost treasury. Caldwell understood that Aurora had been a keystone in a vast, secret economic network whose influence had shaped decades of American development. Yet the ledger also told stories of the people behind the numbers. Families whose names appeared in the journals had been compensated in secrecy or erased entirely. Descendants carried fragments of this knowledge in letters, heirlooms, and oral histories, but the ledger provided a clearer map of the human cost.
Caldwell could trace the trajectories of lives disrupted, of dreams extinguished, and communities scattered across the country, all in the pursuit of secrecy and control. Among the ledger's most shocking entries were references to experimental financing techniques, predating modern economic theories. The council had been testing ways to manipulate credit, investment, and resource allocation, effectively engineering economic outcomes before markets or governments could intervene. This blend of finance, technology, and secrecy was unprecedented, demonstrating the council's sophisticated grasp of both human behavior and systems. Caldwell also discovered marginal notes hinting at moral conflicts within the council. Some members had expressed doubt, fear, or guilt over the human cost of their experiments. These entries were brief, cryptic, but profoundly human, reminding Caldwell that even in an organization of secrecy and power, conscience persisted. By the end of Chapter 17, Caldwell felt the weight of responsibility more acutely than ever. The ledger was not merely a record of financial manipulation, it was a testament to ambition, secrecy, and human cost, intertwined with the technologies and psychological experiments he had uncovered. Aurora's story was now a tapestry of innovation, conspiracy, and humanity, spanning centuries and echoing into the present. Caldwell realized that the full implications of what he had discovered could reshape our understanding of history, power, and morality. James Caldwell had spent years piecing together Aurora's technological, financial, and conspiratorial secrets, yet the human stories were the most haunting. The survivors' accounts, passed down over generations, revealed lives marked by resilience, fear, and ingenuity. Families had fled into remote areas, forming hidden communities that preserved fragments of Aurora's knowledge, often encoded in music, art, and oral tradition. Through careful cross-referencing of journals, diaries, and cryptic messages, Caldwell traced the paths of several survivor networks. One network had settled deep in the Rockies, maintaining secret archives and oral histories. Another had migrated to urban centers, subtly influencing industry and education, carrying knowledge of Aurora's lost technologies. These survivors were living testaments to the city's legacy, quietly shaping society while avoiding detection. Caldwell was struck by the ingenuity of these networks. The survivors had developed symbolic languages, coded songs, and carvings in household objects, ensuring that knowledge could survive even if formal records were destroyed. One diary described a mother teaching her children a melody that encoded geothermal and mechanical formulas, effectively passing down science through music. These ingenious methods underscored Aurora's enduring influence. Even in hiding, the city's knowledge persisted. The modern echoes of Aurora became more apparent as Caldwell investigated. Certain industrial patterns, untraceable innovations, and localized wealth concentrations all bore markers of Aurora's influence. He realized that the Council of Shadows' strategies had left a long-lasting imprint, blending innovation, secrecy, and social manipulation in ways historians had overlooked. Aurora's legacy was woven into the very fabric of modern America, from infrastructure to social networks, yet it remained invisible to the casual observer. Caldwell also uncovered stories of personal sacrifice and courage. Descendants who preserved knowledge often risked their lives to protect it from institutions and individuals seeking to erase Aurora's memory. Letters and diaries described children hiding manuscripts, families fleeing sudden threats, and elders teaching cryptic skills to ensure continuity. These accounts revealed a city's story not merely as a historical anomaly, but as a human saga of endurance and secrecy. By the end of Chapter 18, Caldwell understood that Aurora's true legacy lay not only in technology, finance, or conspiracies, but in the unbroken human spirit that had survived centuries of erasure. The survivors' ingenuity ensured that Aurora's story could finally be told.
Caldwell realized that uncovering these human threads added depth, suspense, and moral complexity to his work, transforming Aurora from a lost city into a living, enduring testament to humanity's resilience and ingenuity. James Caldwell had studied Aurora's physical artifacts, journals, survivor networks, financial ledgers, and psychological experiments, but nothing prepared him for the psychological dimension of the city. Hidden within journals, letters, and encrypted diaries were descriptions of experiments on human perception, obedience, and fear, experiments that revealed the darker side of Aurora's ambitions. Residents were subjected to carefully orchestrated stressors, isolation in tunnel chambers, controlled bursts of light and sound, and mysterious mechanical vibrations. The council meticulously recorded the responses of families, children, and entire communities, noting changes in behavior, compliance, and resilience. Caldwell realized that Aurora was both a laboratory and a social experiment, testing the limits of human endurance and the mechanisms of control. Some diaries revealed the ethical dilemmas faced by the residents themselves. Neighbors were sometimes coerced into observing or participating in these experiments, torn between loyalty, survival, and conscience. One child wrote, "I want to help my family, but I fear the shadows that watch. Every choice feels like a trap." These writings humanized the scientific data, showing that the psychological experiments were not abstract, they inflicted real suffering. Caldwell also uncovered evidence that the council had experimented with early forms of behavioral conditioning, using rewards, punishments, and subtle manipulations to influence compliance. They documented how fear could be weaponized, how small incentives could override morality, and how isolation could alter perception of reality. In essence, Aurora was a grand-scale exploration of mind and society, centuries ahead of formal psychology. The ethical stakes weighed heavily on Caldwell. He understood that revealing these experiments could provoke public outrage, scientific debate, and moral reflection. Yet he also realized that hiding the truth would perpetuate the legacy of secrecy and manipulation. Aurora's story demanded not only historical accuracy, but ethical reckoning, forcing Caldwell to grapple with the implications of knowledge, power, and human vulnerability. By the end of Chapter 19, Caldwell felt a profound responsibility. Aurora had left behind not only technological marvels and financial networks, but a cautionary tale about the fragility of human autonomy and the dangers of unchecked ambition. The psychological experiments revealed that progress, secrecy, and morality were intertwined, and that understanding the past required confronting both innovation and the human cost it exacted. James Caldwell had uncovered much of Aurora's secrets: artifacts, journals, survivor networks, financial ledgers, and psychological experiments, but the most astonishing discoveries were yet to come. In the deepest chamber of the underground vault, he found a collection of inventions and prototypes that had never seen the light of day. These devices, hidden for over a century, hinted at technologies decades ahead of their time. Among them were mechanical devices capable of autonomous operation, early automation systems designed to perform complex tasks without human intervention. Blueprints for geothermal energy harnessing systems suggested the potential to power entire cities, while experimental alloys promised materials stronger and lighter than anything commercially available at the time. Caldwell realized that Aurora was not just a laboratory, but a cradle of innovation, intentionally kept secret by the Council of Shadows. Intertwined with the inventions were coded journals, revealing the purposes, limitations, and risks of each device. Caldwell spent days deciphering the intricate ciphers, uncovering hidden formulas and designs. Some journals contained warnings. These technologies could be used for tremendous good or catastrophic harm, depending on whose hands they fell into. The Council's obsession with secrecy had been driven by a recognition of their potentially world-altering power.
Caldwell also discovered letters indicating collaborations and betrayals among the leading engineers and scientists of Aurora. Some had attempted to preserve their work for public benefit, only to be silenced by the council. Others had willingly aided in concealing the inventions, motivated by wealth, fear, or ambition. These human stories added layers of complexity, showing that Aurora's legacy was as much about people as it was about technology. Perhaps most astonishing were references to communication devices designed to transmit coded messages over long distances. These early prototypes hinted at networks that could coordinate information secretly, predating any known modern communication systems. Caldwell realized that Aurora's technological and social experiments had been complementary, a technology and social machine designed to control information and influence society.
Deliberate integration of machines, psychology, and secrecy designed to influence society on multiple levels. By the end of Chapter 20, Caldwell understood the enormity of his task. He held the keys to Aurora's lost inventions, the encrypted codes that explained them, and the ultimate revelations of the Council's intentions. The city's secrets could accelerate technological progress, expose long-hidden conspiracies, and illuminate the moral dilemmas of knowledge and power. But they could also unleash danger if misunderstood or misused. Caldwell faced a choice that balanced history, ethics, and the fate of knowledge itself. Aurora, though hidden for over a century, had finally revealed its full legacy, and Caldwell knew the world would never be the same. With Aurora's final inventions, coded journals, and hidden artifacts laid out before him, James Caldwell began to see the full extent of the conspiracy. The Council of Shadows had orchestrated decades of manipulation, not just in Aurora, but across the United States. The city had been the first node in a vast network designed to control knowledge, technology, and influence, leaving an indelible mark on modern society. Financial ledgers revealed connections to early industrial magnates, political figures, and even academic institutions. Caldwell realized that the Council had seeded Aurora's innovations throughout industries, creating a hidden infrastructure that shaped the economy, technology, and governance. Railroads, energy grids, and communication networks all bore the fingerprints of Aurora's lost knowledge, yet the general public remained unaware. The coded journals revealed psychological strategies used to manipulate populations, both in Aurora and in distant cities. Fear, obedience, and incentive systems were tested, refined, and quietly implemented in emerging communities. Caldwell saw that the Council's experiments had extended beyond the city, influencing generations of Americans without their knowledge. It was a silent shaping of society itself. Perhaps the most chilling revelation came from letters describing internal purges within the Council. Members who questioned the ethics of experimentation were systematically removed, ensuring that ambition and secrecy trumped morality. Caldwell realized that the city's destruction had not been accidental. It had been a controlled eradication to preserve the Council's network and protect the secrets of Aurora. Caldwell's modern investigations revealed echoes of Aurora in contemporary society. Corporations founded on hidden technologies, families quietly preserving knowledge across generations, and political decisions subtly influenced by the Council's descendants. The implications were staggering. Aurora's influence had persisted for over a century, shaping the present while remaining invisible to history books. As Caldwell pieced together the final puzzle, he understood that the climax of Aurora's story was not just about discovery, but about accountability. Revealing the conspiracy meant exposing centuries of manipulation, technological suppression, and human cost. Every artifact, diary, and blueprint was a thread in a web that tied past, present, and future together.
By the end of chapter 21, Caldwell realized the gravity of his revelations. Aurora had left a legacy of innovation, ambition, secrecy, and moral complexity. It was a story of human resilience, ethical compromise, and the consequences of unchecked power. The shadows of Aurora had been unveiled, illuminating the hidden forces that shaped history and continue to influence society today. Caldwell knew that the world could no longer ignore what had been hidden, and that the city's lessons, both brilliant and horrifying, would echo through time. James Caldwell had spent years delving into Aurora's secrets, and now the human dimension demanded his attention. As he retraced the paths of survivors, he encountered descendants scattered across the country. Some lived in isolated rural areas, quietly guarding fragments of Aurora's legacy, while others had integrated into urban centers, unknowingly perpetuating the city's hidden influence. Each meeting was a revelation, a living link to the town he had only known through artifacts and journals. Reunions were both emotional and shocking. Caldwell met families who had preserved knowledge through songs, coded letters, and symbolic carvings. One elderly woman whose grandfather had fled Aurora as a child demonstrated a melody that encoded formulas for early automation. A man in Chicago showed him a carved wooden box containing micro-blueprints for geothermal systems. These encounters brought the city to life in ways that documents alone could never convey. Caldwell also observed the modern consequences of Aurora's legacy. Some descendants had leveraged knowledge unconsciously, becoming influential in industries, education, and even government. Others struggled under the weight of secrets, fearing discovery or exploitation. The city's influence had rippled through generations, shaping society in subtle yet profound ways. Personal reflections weighed heavily on Caldwell. He recognized that uncovering Aurora's history was not just an academic achievement, it was a moral responsibility. The survivors' stories revealed courage, ingenuity, and suffering, reminding him that the cost of secrecy was human life. As he documented these encounters, he realized that the true legacy of Aurora lay in the resilience of its people. The climax of these reunions was a gathering at a preserved site near the original city's location. Descendants, historians, and Caldwell himself walked through what remained of Aurora's foundations. Artifacts were displayed, coded letters deciphered, and stories shared aloud. For the first time, the city's secrets were collectively acknowledged, bridging past and present. Caldwell felt a profound sense of closure, tempered by awe at the ingenuity, ambition, and suffering that had defined Aurora. By the end of chapter 22, Caldwell understood that Aurora's story was a multi-dimensional legacy, combining technology, finance, psychological experimentation, and human resilience. Its impact on modern America was undeniable, and its lessons about ambition, secrecy, morality, and the endurance of human knowledge resonated deeply. The shadows had been unveiled, illuminating the hidden forces that shaped history and continue to influence society today. James Caldwell had spent years delving into Aurora's secrets, and now the human dimension demanded his attention. As he retraced the paths of survivors, he encountered descendants scattered across the country. Some lived in isolated rural areas, quietly guarding fragments of Aurora's legacy, while others had integrated into urban centers, unknowingly perpetuating the city's hidden influence. Each meeting was a revelation, a living link to the town he had only known through artifacts and journals. Reunions were both emotional and shocking. Caldwell met families who had preserved knowledge through songs, coded letters, and symbolic carvings. One elderly woman whose grandfather had fled Aurora as a child demonstrated a melody that encoded formulas for early automation.
A man in Chicago showed him a carved wooden box containing micro-blueprints for geothermal systems. These encounters brought the city to life in ways that documents alone could never convey. Caldwell also observed the modern consequences of Aurora's legacy. Some descendants had leveraged knowledge unconsciously, becoming influential in industries, education, and even government. Others struggled under the weight of secrets, fearing discovery or exploitation. The city's influence had rippled through generations, shaping society in subtle yet profound ways. Personal reflections weighed heavily on Caldwell. He recognized that uncovering Aurora's history was not just an academic achievement, it was a moral responsibility. The survivors' stories revealed courage, ingenuity, and suffering, reminding him that the cost of secrecy was human life. As he documented these encounters, he realized that the true legacy of Aurora lay in the resilience of its people. The climax of these reunions was a gathering at a preserved site near the original city's location. Descendants, historians, and Caldwell himself walked through what remained of Aurora's foundations. Artifacts were displayed, coded letters deciphered, and stories shared aloud. For the first time, the city's secrets were collectively acknowledged, bridging past and present. Caldwell felt a profound sense of closure, tempered by awe at the ingenuity, ambition, and suffering that had defined Aurora. By the end of Chapter 22, Caldwell understood that Aurora's story was a multi-dimensional legacy, combining technology, finance, psychological experimentation.
The moral and ethical stakes weighed heavily on Caldwell. He pondered the lives affected by Aurora, the families scattered across generations, and the potential consequences of releasing its inventions. He realized that true history is not just a record of events, but a web of consequences and human choices, where every discovery carries responsibility. Despite the gravity, Caldwell also saw hope. The surviving networks of descendants represented human resilience and ingenuity, capable of responsibly preserving and applying Aurora's knowledge. By engaging with them, he could ensure that the city's legacy was not just a tale of ambition and secrecy, but a blueprint for ethical innovation. By the end of Chapter 23, Caldwell understood that Aurora's story was global in scope. Its hidden technologies, the moral dilemmas they posed, and the network of human survivors all converged to create a legacy that transcended borders and generations. The city, though erased from maps and memory, had left behind lessons in power, ethics, resilience, and the enduring pursuit of knowledge. Caldwell's journey had become not just an excavation of history, but a confrontation with the timeless questions of human ambition and responsibility. By this stage of his investigation, James Caldwell had uncovered almost every secret Aurora held: lost inventions, hidden networks, survivor legacies, and global implications. Yet the most challenging discoveries were not technological or historical, they were moral. Caldwell realized that the city's secrets were a double-edged sword. They could liberate humanity with innovation and knowledge, or they could empower exploitation and oppression on a scale the world had never seen. Caldwell gathered with survivors and descendants in a concealed chamber near the original city site. Maps, journals, and prototypes were laid out across tables. The conversation turned quickly to ethics. Who should control the knowledge? How much should the world know? Could humanity handle the consequences of fully understanding Aurora's technology and social experiments? These questions divided the group, some advocating full transparency, others caution, fearing misuse or panic. Aurora's secret networks, still active in subtle ways, came under scrutiny. Caldwell learned that descendants had formed informal councils, passing knowledge down through generations while carefully concealing it from the wider world.
The network had been instrumental in preserving Aurora's inventions and stories, but had also created power imbalances as select individuals controlled access to revolutionary technologies. The discussions intensified when Caldwell demonstrated some of Aurora's lost inventions: geothermal engines capable of powering entire cities, early automated machinery that could replace labor at unprecedented scales, and coded communication devices that could coordinate secret operations across continents. The ethical dilemma became tangible. If these tools were misused, they could destabilize economies, governments, and social structures. Historical lessons emerged from survivor accounts. Families described the human cost of secrecy, broken communities, lost knowledge, and the psychological burden of guardianship. Some descendants had endured threats and persecution because of their connection to Aurora. Caldwell realized that knowledge without ethical stewardship could be as dangerous as suppression itself. The climax of the chapter arrived when Caldwell proposed a solution, a controlled revelation, in which Aurora's history, inventions, and ethical lessons would be shared with select educational and scientific institutions. The network would guide the process, ensuring responsible application, while society at large would gradually learn of Aurora's legacy. It was a compromise, balancing transparency, progress, and responsibility. By the end of Chapter 24, Caldwell understood that Aurora's story was not merely about a lost city, but a framework for the responsible use of knowledge and power. The ethical crossroads he faced reflected humanity itself, the tension between ambition, secrecy, and morality, and the enduring question of whether people could handle the truths that shaped history. Aurora's shadows had been illuminated, but the choices its legacy demanded would resonate for generations to come. James Caldwell had reached a pivotal moment in his decades-long investigation. Aurora's lost technologies, hidden networks, and global implications had been meticulously documented. Yet a final layer remained: the ultimate discoveries that tied the city's past to the present. Among the artifacts was a series of manuscripts detailing inventions and theories that had never been implemented, innovations capable of reshaping energy, transportation, and communication worldwide. Caldwell realized that these lost discoveries were more than mere blueprints. They represented ideas suppressed by secrecy, ambition, and fear. They were intended to be the next step in humanity's progress, yet the Council of Shadows had ensured their concealment. Caldwell pored over the designs for automated infrastructure, self-sustaining power systems, and early automated machinery that could replace labor at unprecedented scales.
Mechanical intelligence. Each innovation carried the potential to transform modern society, but only if handled with responsibility and foresight. The ethical dilemmas came into sharper focus. Caldwell now faced the decision of how to reveal Aurora's findings. Full disclosure risked destabilizing industries and empowering powerful elites, while suppression would continue the cycle of secrecy that had defined Aurora for over a century. Through discussions with survivors and descendants, he formulated a balanced plan: a controlled release to educational institutions, research organizations, and carefully vetted policymakers. Knowledge would be shared, but with a framework of ethical responsibility, ensuring that Aurora's legacy could benefit humanity without repeating past mistakes. Caldwell also reflected on the human cost of the city's experiments. Diaries, letters, and oral histories chronicled the struggles of families, the courage of children, and the moral conflicts of those who had participated in or resisted Aurora's social manipulations. These stories reminded him that progress without conscience could never be justified, and that the true measure of Aurora's legacy lay in both its inventions and its moral lessons. In the final chamber, Caldwell compiled a comprehensive record: blueprints, coded journals, financial ledgers,
survivor testimonies, and moral reflections. He recognized that this record was more than a historical archive. It was a guide for the responsible use of knowledge and power. Aurora had been erased from maps and memory, but its lessons could now illuminate the path forward, merging innovation with ethics. By the end of Chapter 26, Caldwell understood the full weight of his journey. Aurora's legacy was multidimensional: technological brilliance, psychological insight, financial ingenuity, and ethical complexity, all intertwined. The city's shadows had been revealed, its secrets brought to light, and its lessons preserved. Caldwell knew that the world would never be the same, and that the choices humanity made in response to Aurora's revelations would define the future. James Caldwell had spent decades unraveling Aurora's mysteries, and now he confronted the city's ultimate legacy, a convergence of technology, ethics, and human endurance. The full spectrum of discoveries revealed not only lost inventions and secret networks, but also profound lessons about power, responsibility, and resilience. Aurora was no longer just a historical anomaly. It was a template for understanding how knowledge and morality intersect. Caldwell meticulously cataloged every artifact, journal, and coded manuscript. The technological revelations were staggering: automated infrastructure capable of transforming urban life, energy systems that could sustainably power entire regions, and communication devices that predated modern networking by decades. Yet he also understood that these inventions carried profound ethical responsibility. Misuse could destabilize societies, while careful application could usher in an era of progress and equity. The human legacy was equally compelling. Survivors' descendants had preserved Aurora's lessons through coded songs, oral histories, and subtle technological applications. Families had endured persecution, displacement, and secrecy, yet their resilience ensured that Aurora's story survived. Caldwell recognized that technology alone could never define Aurora's importance. It was the perseverance, ingenuity, and moral conscience of its people that made the city's legacy enduring. Ethical stewardship became Caldwell's guiding principle. He formulated a plan to release Aurora's knowledge responsibly. Educational institutions would receive carefully curated blueprints, historical analyses, and ethical guidelines. Survivor networks would oversee the process, ensuring that humanity benefited from Aurora's brilliance without repeating the mistakes of secrecy and ambition. Caldwell realized that the city's shadows were not to be feared. They were a map for responsible innovation. The climax of his work came when he presented the complete findings to a select group of historians, engineers, and ethical advisors. The room was filled with awe, astonishment, and reflection. Caldwell explained the Council of Shadows' manipulations, Aurora's technological innovations, and the moral lessons embedded in centuries of secrecy. The audience understood that Aurora's story was not just about the past. It was a guide for humanity's future, a testament to the delicate balance between knowledge, ethics, and human resilience. By the end of Chapter 27, Caldwell felt a profound sense of closure. Aurora's legacy was secured in multiple dimensions, its inventions preserved, its ethical lessons codified, and its human stories honored. The city's shadows had been illuminated fully, revealing a narrative of brilliance, ambition, resilience, and moral complexity. Caldwell knew that Aurora's revelations would echo through generations, shaping technology, society, and conscience. Humanity had been gifted not only knowledge, but the responsibility to wield it wisely. James Caldwell sat surrounded by centuries of collected knowledge: journals, blueprints, survivor testimonies, coded manuscripts, and technological artifacts. The city of Aurora, long erased from maps and memory, had finally revealed its ultimate impact.
Every thread of invention, human resilience, psychological experiment, and secret network now wove into a comprehensive tapestry, illuminating a city that was far ahead of its time. Caldwell reflected on Aurora's technological innovations. Automated machinery, geothermal energy systems, and coded communication devices were mere historical curiosities, but blueprints capable of reshaping the modern world. He realized that the Council of Shadows had intended Aurora to be a testing ground, a controlled experiment in societal manipulation, innovation, and ethical challenge. Yet even as he marveled at the inventions, he recognized the human cost. Families uprooted, communities disrupted, and ethical lines blurred. The psychological dimension of Aurora's legacy was equally profound. Survivors had endured fear, manipulation, and isolation, yet their resilience preserved knowledge across generations. Survivors' descendants had created informal networks to safeguard inventions, passing down ethical lessons encoded in art, music, and oral histories. Caldwell saw clearly that technology without human conscience is incomplete, and that the true lesson of the city lay in the intersection of innovation, morality, and endurance. Financial and global implications added further complexity. Aurora's hidden ledgers revealed strategies for influencing industries, markets, and political systems, echoing far beyond the city's destruction. The Council's subtle manipulations had shaped the economy and society of modern America and even touched international spheres. Caldwell understood that uncovering Aurora's story was not just a historical achievement, it was an intervention in understanding the forces that shape the world. As he synthesized the findings, Caldwell formulated a plan to balance revelation and responsibility. Aurora's inventions would be shared with ethical oversight, historical truths preserved, and survivor legacies honored. This approach ensured that knowledge could enlighten rather than exploit, and that the lessons of ambition, secrecy, and resilience would inform future generations. The final reflection was deeply personal. Caldwell recognized that uncovering Aurora's story had transformed him as much as it transformed history. He had witnessed the tension between power and conscience, ambition and morality, secrecy and transparency. Aurora's legacy was now illuminated fully, a story of human ingenuity, ethical complexity, and enduring resilience, a blueprint for understanding history and guiding the future. By the end of Chapter 28, Caldwell understood the ultimate impact of Aurora. The city's shadows had become light, its secrets a map for ethical innovation, and its human stories a testament to survival and conscience. Aurora had survived centuries of erasure, not through monuments or fame, but through the careful preservation of knowledge, the courage of its people, and the moral choices of those who inherited its legacy. Humanity had been gifted not only the tools of progress, but the wisdom to wield them wisely.
James Caldwell had spent decades tracing Aurora's secrets, and now he faced the culmination of his journey, cementing the city's legacy for the modern world. Every discovery, technological marvels, psychological experiments, hidden networks, and human stories had led to this moment. Aurora was no longer just a lost city. It was a multi-dimensional phenomenon whose lessons spanned ethics, science, finance, and human resilience. Caldwell's first task was to ensure that knowledge would be preserved responsibly. He coordinated with survivor networks, historians, and ethical advisors to curate a controlled release of Aurora's inventions, journals, and testimonies. Automated devices, geothermal systems, and coded communication technologies were documented and safeguarded, accompanied by detailed ethical guidelines. The plan balanced innovation and caution, allowing society to benefit without risking exploitation or disruption. Modern societal implications became apparent as Caldwell analyzed the broader influence of Aurora.
hidden financial networks had subtly shaped industries and trade for over a century. Psychological experiments had influenced social structures and behavioral norms, leaving echoes in education, governance, and interpersonal dynamics. Caldwell realized that Aurora's legacy was woven into the fabric of contemporary society, yet the full scope remained invisible to most historians and citizens. The human dimension provided the most profound insights. Descendants of Aurora's survivors had preserved traditions, coded knowledge, and moral lessons that ensured the city's story endured. Families shared oral histories, songs, and symbolic artifacts, creating a living bridge between past and present. Caldwell recognized that the true strength of Aurora's legacy lay not in machines or blueprints, but in the enduring spirit, ingenuity, and conscience of its people. Caldwell also faced the ultimate ethical reckoning. The decisions made regarding Aurora's revelation could shape technological progress, social dynamics, and global influence. He weighed the potential benefits against the risks of misuse. Through dialogue with ethical committees and survivor representatives, he ensured that transparency would coexist with stewardship, allowing humanity to inherit knowledge while learning from the city's history of secrecy and ambition. The climax of Chapter 29, and perhaps of Caldwell's career, came with the publication of the Aurora Compendium, a comprehensive record of the city's inventions, social experiments, psychological insights, and survivor accounts. Scholars, engineers, and ethical experts received access to carefully curated portions, while the general public gained a contextual understanding of Aurora's impact. The narrative illuminated not only historical facts, but also the moral and societal lessons embedded in the city's shadowy past. By the end of Chapter 29, Caldwell understood the magnitude of Aurora's ultimate impact. The city's secrets had been fully unveiled, its ethical and technological lessons codified, and its human stories preserved for posterity. Aurora's shadows had transformed into light, providing a guide for responsible innovation, societal reflection, and historical understanding. Humanity had inherited both knowledge and conscience, a dual legacy that would echo for generations. Caldwell knew that through careful stewardship, the brilliance, ambition, and resilience of Aurora would continue to shape the future, a testament to the enduring power of human ingenuity and moral responsibility.